Okay, thank you so much. Hey, I'm glad to be here. We have a small group, but it's good you made the point to come because I know you're going to walk away with some good tips. I'm excited about power networking. I think it's a very powerful tool, and we're going to talk about a more systematic way to do it. We all have networked probably, but this is a different approach, and it's just something that's really for life. Whatever you learn and start to do today is going to help you throughout your career. So it's a very exciting topic, and I just love to talk about it, so I hope you enjoy. So before we get started, let me just ask, how many of you have networked before and gotten a job through it? Is that something that you're comfortable with doing, have done? Okay. And so the part about the job, so do you feel like if you've networked before, it led to a job directly or indirectly? Let's see a separate set of hands on that. Oh, okay, so we network, we talk to people, sometimes casually, ad hoc, and you'll learn a way that's a little more systematic and structured. But had it ever, for you, turned into a job? Like you talked to somebody and they said, hey, I know a job, let me connect you with the hiring manager.
My answer was first.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
All right. So that's something that we can increase the odds of it actually materializing in something like that, if that's what you're looking for. So there's really a lot to this, and it will be a more structured approach, and so it will give you some new ways to think about it. So here's what we're going to go over today. I've created 5 different areas. One is just looking at how do you feel about networking? Does it scare you? Are you an introvert? And does it just fill you with dread? This is something that a lot of people really think, and so something's holding them back. And so we want to look at that. What's holding you back? Especially if you're an introvert. If you're an introvert, sometimes, we're not comfortable with small talk and some of the things that might go into it. So anyone consider themselves an introvert here? I am? You are? Okay, so a lot of people here. And so that's one, that makes it even another layer, if you will, of just things that might have us hesitate. So we'll address that a little bit. If that's you, there's some things I'd like to tell you about that. And remember, I'm an introvert too. So how does it benefit you? So really when we go from what's holding you back to why should you do it, what's it going to give back to you, what's the return, that's a natural progression. So I really want to get into the benefits, because if you don't believe in it, you're not going to invest in it. So it's just the way life is. So I want to get you on the other side of that, where this is something that's going to help me, and I'll show you what that looks like. Then the next part is actually a breakout activity where we work on our own to write with a template that I've created, and you can actually look at it if you'd like, how to write your pitch. And so this is a verbal, I like to call it a 2-minute pitch. It isn't the 30-second elevator type, because this goes into a little more detail. All this will become clear. And so this is a great opportunity for you to start doing this or pick up on something that you might have already started. It's a powerful tool. It makes a big difference in how prepared you feel and comfortable and confident when you present yourself. And a side benefit is this very verbal presentation is useful for job interviews. For that classic question, tell me about yourself. This is the answer. So I think you're going to love it. Number 4, finding and building your network, especially for an introvert. A lot of questions are, where do I find these people? What do I talk about? Where do I start? So I've got some really good news for you there. Just like everything in life, we start with where we are today, and that means who you know today. It makes it a lot easier, and then you go forward from there. And then finally, creating a structured approach. So the approach that I'm talking about is really built around something that probably most of you have heard of and maybe done before. It's called the informational interview. Does that sound like something you've done or know about? Has everyone heard of informational interviewing? No. Okay, so that's sort of a classic, and this is taking that concept of basically talking to people instead of nowadays just sitting in front of the computer, answering job posts, which is an okay way to go. But this is actually, most jobs are found through the network. So it gives you a way to to do this activity of setting up meetings with people that are very comfortable. They're only 20 minutes, and you're going to have a script from me that you can adapt. You're going to have an agenda example that you can use. It's really color by number. So that's what I like about it, and that's what I made sure, because I think that takes the fear factor out. So before we get into some of the activities here, I would like to give you a firsthand experience, if you don't have one already, of actually experiencing what is cold calling or cold networking like, which is probably most of our fears. So often when you're in a networking, more ad hoc situation like a conference or maybe a networking event, people always ask, so what do you do? And that is an answer that we're going to work on tonight with the 2-minute commercial. But before we get there, I want you to try it out and see what comes to you without the benefit of me sharing with you, here's how to make that really compelling. Here's how to nail that and feel really comfortable when someone says, so what do you do? So what I'd like you to do now is to find someone you don't know, stand up or sit down, your choice, and take turns for each other for 5 minutes total, asking each other, my name is, and then, so why are you here tonight? Which is a great icebreaker. Instead of starting with, hi, what do you do? So what brought you here tonight? Why are you here tonight? Then the other question is really important for our purpose here is, so what do you do? So if you would now, find a partner you don't know, and then we're going to take 5 minutes, and then you're going to let me know how that went. So go ahead if you would, and find a partner. Okay, well, that was 5 minutes, so hopefully that was interesting. Good, so we'll share our experiences now. So 5 minutes, was that enough for you?
Yeah.
Good, okay. All right, so how did that go? Who was comfortable with answering the question, tell me about yourself? Wait, let me just make sure everyone's, okay, good, thanks. You had a lot more to say to each other. So who was comfortable with that question? Tell me about yourself. When then it was your turn to answer, did it feel like you knew what you wanted to say, it was comfortable, no sweat, or did you have no idea what to talk about, or maybe something in the middle? You're smiling at me.
That was easy. I had a partner to talk to.
Yeah. So anyone get stuck? I have no idea what to talk about. Anybody? Okay, so that's what we're going to take a look at here. So if you were in one of those camps, it's okay. And just to think about, you'll have an opportunity to reflect back. So how did I answer that, and what could I do better next time or differently? So let's move on. We talked about for a few minutes, just where are you at today? What stands in your way? And so if we look at the list on the left, a lot of people feel some of the things that you see or believe. So belief is a limiting belief, like, oh, no one wants to take my call, so why bother? That's a limiting belief. Who would like to read the left list? Thank you, yes. Yes. Does this sound and feel familiar to you?
Absolutely.
Is there anything else I don't have that is on the left list? Yes.
I think it just gets so draining over and over again. Like, I go to interviews and stuff of just constantly being like, I want to try to do a song and dance routine. Like me, please like me. And that gets really draining.
Yes. Yeah, that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And so what you'll like is the template I'm giving you, and later you're going to have a way to talk about yourself. That's going to take a lot of the pressure off. Oh, I've got to figure this out. Is this right? Is this wrong? You'll know. So then when we look at how do we shift? So imposing on people, I hear that a lot. No one's really going to call me back, or they don't want to help me, and it's wasting their time. So the truth is, it's well known that most people actually are flattered to be asked for their advice. Can you give me some advice? I'd love to talk to you about your experience, whatever you might be asking. Most people are like, oh, sure. So if you think back to yourself, when a person did come up to you, maybe a younger person, can you tell me how you got into school, or how did you decide your major, or you're in this field and I'm interested in thinking about it, could you tell me a little bit about it? Doesn't that feel good if you've been asked that kind of thing? So remember that, and that's important. People usually like to be asked. The other one is you don't like asking for a job. Well, that is awkward. You know, you might not know somebody and I don't have a job, do you know of anything? I would feel uncomfortable asking that too. This type of networking, that's one of the no-nos, because you're asking to talk to somebody to get advice or information. You're not asking them to help you get a job. So that's why. So that's an interesting one, because some people think, oh, I'm afraid to say it. That's good, because you shouldn't. So then number 3, you don't like cold calling. Actually, I know a lot of salespeople who don't like to cold call. And the good news here is that you're really starting with people you know, who are, they're called your inner circle. We'll take a look at that in a few minutes. And then you can get referrals to new people. So again, it's already feeling more comfortable. That's your comfort zone, people you know. So the good thing there is that it really is, and I'll probably use this expression a few times because I think it fits, it's really color by number, and you'll see how. And then finally, I don't know what to say, and especially for us introverts, trying to figure out small talk, or how you're going to even talk about yourself fills us with dread sometimes. So the good news is, by creating a script, having that 2-minute script, and what you're going to say in advance, knowing the questions you want to ask, is going to make you feel more comfortable and prepared, because you know what to expect. So all of this will be discussed, and we'll have a chance to learn more about all those points. So I mentioned that coming from the place of what's stopping you to a place of I should be doing this because look how it's going to help me. Now we're going to look at 5 ways. Why and how does it benefit you? So who knows what this, I put this as number 1 for a person. What is the hidden job market? Anyone know, or can you guess? So what that represents is, some of the hints are right here, that the jobs that are never published, representing more than half of the jobs out there. So that's a very intriguing statistic, that high of a percent of jobs are never published. So that tells us a couple very important things, that looking on job sites is a technique, and sometimes it's more effective than others depending on your situation, but it's not the main way to go. The other thing that to learn, and this is something we're going to explore for the next about 5 minutes, 75% of jobs are filled before they're advertised. And so the reason is because your network, if you're networking, leads you to the jobs through the hiring manager, and or the hiring manager has his or her own network that they're tapping into. So the point is, they're often filled, or there could be other things. Their network, there's a lot to this, could include employees. So there's a lot of color here, but that's a really big thing. So the other reason, the unpublished positions are often created at the time of this referral networking, I like to call it, or informational interview, if you're talking to a hiring manager. So if you have a really compelling self-presentation, a la the 2-minute commercial, and you really understand the value you bring, again, you will have a chance to look at this for yourself shortly, you're going to be a more compelling person to talk to. They're going to listen to, oh, really, you can help me with that. Let's explore. So that's the really exciting part about this. A key goal of networking, getting referrals to decision makers. Yes?
Are you saying that are not even positions?
Yes, sometimes it's sort of the best possible outcome. That when you really understand what you're what you're offering, and we're going to get into that, your value and your branding, then you know about what that company is going through to some extent. You've done some research. You've talked about the pain points of the industry to other people maybe in your networking. You understand, and so then when you talk to them, you just get referred through the networking referral process, not for the job. And so there could be pain points, and I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. What is that hiring manager going through that you just don't know? And so if you're there at the right time and you get referred to them, it can happen and does. So here we have it. The number 2 benefit is connecting with hiring managers or hiring decision makers, leaders. So if that hiring manager's colleagues, employees, friends are part of your network, and an easy example is to think about LinkedIn. That's an easy one, but it's more than just LinkedIn, but how you can be connected to people in first, second, and third levels. That's an easy example of how this works. So then that gives you access to that hidden job. So many managers actually use their own network outside of posting, whether they post in addition or instead of. That's how a lot of jobs are filled. So this is an example of what I was talking about earlier. So the internal network, the manager or maybe HR has an internal candidate they want to bring forward. Now, sometimes things are happening behind the scenes. If you apply to a job and suddenly the job disappears, I hear that a lot. It could be some things like this behind the scenes, and or they are obligated to post a job, for instance, even though they pretty much know who they're going to have fill it. Things like that happen all the time, but that's an internal network, somebody within the organization. Employee network. So another thing we're all probably familiar with is a lot of organizations have an incentive program for employees. If you forward someone for the position and they get hired, they will get a referral fee. And so that's another reason to think, or an actual example of why sometimes people are happy to talk to you. If you know someone at a company and you see a job posting, you wouldn't say, hey, can you get my resume over there? But rather, do you know anything about this position? I see that there's something posted. Do you have any information? So that's a very low-key ask. Doesn't put anyone on the spot. And the point is, that person might be incentivized to actually help you. Yes, actually, I do know about it, and let me get some information and get back to you. I know the hiring manager personally, you never know. So things like that are happening behind the scenes, just to be aware. And then finally, the hiring manager's personal network. So, they've got their own network, and so as you can guess, they're asking, hey, do you know like a top salesperson who's really good that really knows technology sales? Do you know of anybody? And so they just, network, and they don't even post the jobs. I actually know a lot of people at the leadership level that do that. So any questions about this so far? So number 3 is what I was referring to a little bit earlier. This is really very important because one of the easiest ways to get access to people and have them agree to talk to you is to have questions you want to ask them. You want feedback, or you want advice, or just information. I mean, it sounds pretty obvious, but instead of that fear of, well, what do I say to get the call, or what do I do? This is it. So it's such a simple thing. And so you start with, what do you really need to know today? So if you're an early job seeker just graduating, or if you're somebody that's mid-career and you've been doing something for a while, and or you're a person that wants to pivot or just continue on and find the right fit company, whatever it is you're looking to do, those are your questions or needs today. Remember, we start with where we're at right now, that drive your search. And people that would be helpful to talk to. So who will be able to help me with these things? So here are just some examples. Industry trends, needs, and opportunities. What are the pain points? What's going on? And so that's interesting, especially if you're a career pivot person who's looking for a different one, different career, or you're new and you want to, you just graduated and you want to kind of reality test, I like to call it. Opportunities, that's a good one. Getting strategies for gaining traction on a role. Sometimes people need that because they're not getting traction. What is your advice? So that's somebody that's working in that field or industry and knows what it takes. Finally, and these are just examples, this one is a very common one for people who know what a typical day is like. They pretty much know the pain points of an industry. They've been at it for a while. They're just looking for the right fit. When I work with clients, I do work with a lot of people at a leadership level. That's the most common thing I hear. I want a company whose values fit my own, whose culture that I like. Their examples, they believe in talent, they invest in talent, and they develop their leaders. So the leadership is trained. So actually culture just means leadership. So really, this is a very common one, and this is a very easy in to talk to people. So I'm looking for target companies for my next career move. And I've heard good things about your company. Would you be willing to talk to me for 20 minutes and just tell me a little bit about it? Okay, that's one way to use networking for that question. Another is you've researched companies, because of course, you can do research on the side, and you've identified some companies that are really well thought of, maybe they best places to work list or whatever it is. So then you look in LinkedIn and you find people you know or people that might know other people. Another opportunity, hey, I see your acquaintance works at one of the companies I'm targeting. Would you be willing to connect us? And so I can talk to them about their experience. And sometimes you just ask people, I'll talk about different types of contacts that you want to network with, people who are connectors. Some people love to network and they're called connectors. They're going to like to talk to you. They'll probably say, call me anytime. Those are great people to know. They're going to know the lay of the land in that industry. Those people can help you identify the great companies to work for. So the goal is to listen for and ask about opportunities and pain points to help you form your search strategy. Yes? Pain points are challenges and needs, what's going on in the industry. Why is that manager looking for somebody? A pain point can be the person in the job today just isn't performing that well. And now we're getting overworked. We don't have enough people. I need someone to help me. Or a pain point could be, most industries are under pressure. The most common thing change is the most common thing. So there's something going on and they need to fill positions. Those are pain points. Or now China is a big competitor. You name it. It could be industry level or just personal level. Does that make sense? Yes. Yeah, what's going on that they need to solve for? Yeah, you could say it's actually a more engaging term, I think. Instead of saying what are your struggles and problems, you could say what are your pain points? Can you share that with me? What's that?
That's so interesting, right?
Yeah, and if you're feeling like, oh, is this comfortable? You can always ask. I'm curious is a good way to soften a question that you're, wondering. Hey, I'm kind of curious. Can you tell me, what your pain points are? What keeps you up at night? Things like that. So I told you you'd learn some new things today. So number 3, let's see. Let me just check something here. Yeah. All right. So the next one, number 4, is career advice. Now this is probably going to be more for the earlier career person. So, basically you can see there the types of things that you can ask people, especially if you're at that stage. So again, the morale here is tailor your questions to specific people who can help you or that you refer to. You might ask a friend, I'm looking for somebody that might know this. That's how you get to, put together your needs and people to talk to. So moving on, number 5, in this approach to networking, this is the golden rule. This is the big ask. So it's all about starting with who you know today. Remember, we're talking about that your inner circle and going forward and expanding. The more people you meet and the more companies that represents, the better position you're going to be not only for this next job search, but for the rest of your career. And that is not overstating. So why do we network? To expand our network. So I talked about, and we'll get more into what these meetings are like when you do have a conversation. That's another way to put it. A networking conversation. You have your questions ready. the last question is this. So you've been talking for about 15 minutes or so. Say, this has been so helpful. Thank you so much. I've learned a lot, and I'm really going to, put some of these ideas into action. I have one last question for you. Can you suggest anyone it would be helpful for me to talk to? And so, you can ask that in different ways, but I like that way to do it. It's just a soft way to do it. And then you can prompt anyone in your field who might have insights that could help me, anyone inside specific companies. So remember, think about what you asked that person. Why did you want to talk to them? And then you tailor. You could have several things that you would like them, reasons to refer you to people. It could be the right company or somebody that knows everybody. So really be open to this. And we'll look at that in a few minutes too. You'll see the types of people out there, and that will help you know, oh, this would be a good type of person to find. So always wait till the end of the conversation. Why is that? Do you think you'd start out, hi, thank you so much. Can you suggest anyone I can talk to? Versus you go on for 15 minutes and then you ask, what's the real reason we wait till the end? Do you have a sense of that?
Talking to them, so you're trying to find out what so that's kind of a natural segue into the next conversation. Like if you say it at the beginning, why am I here when you want
Yeah,
to,
right. Or they might think, yeah, I could have just emailed this to you.
Yeah.
So the other reason, that's a good call, you build trust. So you're really actually connecting to build a connection. I don't know if I want to say a relationship, but the idea is this is a building relationship opportunity. And that's why the more prepared you are with your 2-minute commercial and the questions you want to ask, and plus I'll show you how to run that 20-minute conversation, you will impress them. So they'll probably be happy to give you referrals. So branding is really important. So I told you before, I gave you a hint, that we're really going to want to look at what's the value you bring. Because if you understand that, and that's sometimes hard to understand. I work with a lot of people, even people who have been in their field for 15 or 20 years, sometimes more. If I ask them, so what would you, if I just said in one sentence, what would be your thought about the value you bring to your companies that you work for? It's really, really hard to do it. And so that's something that's why spending a little time trying to think of that today and then working on it even after today's session is going to help you more than you might know. So we're going to get into that. And this is the cornerstone of the 2-minute commercial. So show what you offer with a value statement. This is really the way we start that longer form 2-minute commercial. Because we want to kind of engage someone with, here's what I'm about. So the more you understand this, the more you can clarify that with other people. Here's what I do. You really need to understand that. Then you can communicate it and put messaging around it in verbal and written ways. We're talking mostly verbal today, but look at, there's your resume and of course your LinkedIn profile. There's a lot of ways that you can use this. So let's just take a quick look at the value statement before we get deeper into the 2-minute commercial and then take a little time for us to write our own. So who wants to break down the 4 components for us? Read out, what does a value statement, what is it comprised of? Anyone want to just read that list? That's okay, I'm happy to do
I'll
it.
do it.
Okay, sure, great.
So the value statement components.
Yes,
Okay, your role, what you do, how you add value, how you do get the organization, how do you do it, secrets, job strengths and competencies,
yes,
who do target audience.
yeah. So, I mean, if you just think about, you're driving down 94 in Chicago and you see a billboard and it's advertising toothpaste. It's really the same kind of stuff. It's why should you buy their toothpaste? How is it going to help you? And Who are they trying to reach? So these things are not always spelled out, but this is really behind how they're grabbing you to want to buy their product. So now let me read out a sample value statement. So you're in a situation and someone says, say you're at a meeting and there's a networking segment, just like tonight. And someone says, so tell me, what do you do? And here's the answer for this person. So I'm an HR leader who makes improvements that help organizations operate at high levels of productivity by building structures so people can give their best and like what they do. Okay, now think about the way you answered that question tonight. What do you do? So what is the difference between this approach and maybe what you would use? You don't have to give too detailed, but do you see at least how rich it can be and compelling? So hopefully whoever delivered this, it's done in a very easy way. They're comfortable saying it. If they need to shorten it to be comfortable, fine. But when you're talking to a person and someone says that to you, how are you going to respond versus, well, I'm an HR manager? And that's what they say, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But I just want to point out how much more compelling and dynamic it can be to go a little bit farther and say a little more. There's a lot more for people to pick up on and ask questions. That develops into a conversation. Okay, so now I'm going to lead into your 2-minute profile. I call it different things, but 2-minute presentation, verbal, commercial. So the beginning of it is the value statement. So before you even can talk about, here's a little bit about me and here's how I can help you and what I'm looking for, you want to understand the value statement. And the rest of it is outlined here. And so this is what you're going to be, in the handout you were given, you're going to be asked to fill out a summary of your related experience, your key relevant strengths, and what you're pursuing next. So the key thing to realize is that when you're doing something like this, and say you're networking, or later job interviewing perhaps, you're thinking about where you're going from now going forward. It's not an encapsulation of your past. So just like if you're interviewing and someone says, tell us about yourself, it's not, well, first I went to college. I'm just exaggerating for the point. I got a degree in accounting, and then I got my first job as an intern. That's really not what they're looking for. So think about what you're offering now going forward. It can be tricky if you're somebody who's entertaining a pivot, but what the trick is there, and you've probably heard this before, is you try to connect the dots between your competencies and skills, expertise, and what that new position or target role is looking for. So there's ways to do that. So here's an example of this person who now took their value statement and took it a little farther. So they're in a networking, they've asked someone, can I have 20 minutes of your time? So they start out the session with, thank you so much, I really appreciate your time today. And as I mentioned, I have some questions I want to ask you. Before we get there, do you mind if I just give you a little quick synopsis of my background, a little quick summary? Of course, please go ahead. So, well, what I do is I make improvements that help organizations operate at high levels of productivity and performance. In my career, I've straddled HR and operations roles, always with an eye towards setting up the structures so people can give their best and like what they do. I was a hiring manager in a publishing house that produced high volumes of books. To meet demand, I developed big picture organization and workflows by identifying and resolving gaps and breakdowns. The results were that I crafted a well-oiled machine capable of producing about 50 concurrent books. I improved hiring methods, wrote a help guide, and collaborated on a database. And to make sure people flourished, I trained and mentored staff. So I was really proud to say that our system saved about $500,000 in staff costs and helped us produce about 250 titles a year. I'm especially proud, though, that we were successful in improving performance and productivity while keeping employees engaged. So what I'm looking to do now is I'm looking to explore opportunities in HR, either in-house or contract, where I can help improve performance while nurturing the people. I'm looking for small entrepreneurial companies that are growing, but don't have the resources or leadership to make that happen. So in my email to you, I mentioned I was wanting to ask you about companies you might know about. And so this is really the type of thing I'm looking for, if you're familiar with, more of a smaller entrepreneurial company. They're probably in the early growth phase in the area, and they're having some growth pains. So if you could share with me any of those, that would be really appreciated. So this is basically how it goes. Any questions on this? And this is actually going to set you up to now write your own. I wanted to give you an example so that you have one. Any questions before we get into the activity? Okay, so we're going to now draft your own. Whoops, sorry, went ahead. So if you would please pull out your activity, your template. It's actually broken down step by step to make it really easy, because like I said before, these are not easy to write. But by starting with the first one, which is the value statement, and then going into the next ones, because you see, you're going to recognize the one I showed you before, how it was built up. So if you would take 15 minutes to just write out some ideas, use the back sides of the pages if you'd like, and just don't worry, because you'll probably be working on this later. But it's a good start, and it will be worth it. So enjoy, and let me know if you have any questions. Okay, so now we're going to move into something I've been alluding to all along, which is how do you find and build your network? You know, what is this about? There's a process, of course. So let's take a look at how this works. So I've mentioned this idea of your inner circle. Who do you know today? Start with what's comfortable, and that's really where you want to start. So at the bottom, you see inner circle. It could be friends, colleagues, acquaintances. So the truth is, we've all been building a network our entire lives. So whether you're just starting out, just graduated from college, or well into your career, you might know people through school, classes, religious institutions, jobs, neighborhoods, you know, you name it, even family. So you have a network. It's just now appreciating how to use it and look at them, and maybe, you know, turn to them. So one of the things I wanted to mention now is you will get a copy of my presentation, and it will have an appendix with some of these exercises in it, including a Find Your Network exercise. So it will give you a start to that. So this is how you think about it. Now, we really want to say, how do we go from our inner to these decision makers, these influencers that we've been hearing about for this entire, you know, session today. So to do that, you really want to start by, you know, finding people you know and their connections to other people, leaders. So it's really important to kind of be familiar with the types of people out there. You might not call them mavens, but it's good to know that kind of person who's helpful to talk to. You're not going to say, hey, Joe, do you know any mavens? But what you might say is, Joe, do you know anyone who has been in this industry or field for a long time and is a real expert on what's happening, the pain points, if you will? You know, what's going on in the industry? Who do you know like that? You know, if that's the kind of person you want to talk to. A connector, I mentioned that before too. That's always a great person to talk to, the person who knows everybody, right? So those people are happy to take your call and will encourage you to call them back, and they'll make you feel good. You'll feel like, this is great. So if you can even start with someone like that, you're going to feel, I love this networking, and it's going to keep you coming back for more. So that's really, you know, the main thing. And when the more you go along, the more you're going to start to fine tune. Who do I need to talk to for the questions I have? So kind of in your back pocket are, what are the questions you need to know? And therefore, what kind of person is going to be most helpful? So it all goes hand in glove. So you never know who in your current network is going to be able to connect you with a leader or someone of influence. So number 3, how to expand your network. So this one is more of a general We're not doing too much with the ad hoc, face-to-face opportunities and just, calling someone you haven't talked to for a few years. All that's good. All networking is good. The one I want to pay attention to is don't overlook weak ties and acquaintances. So this is a really core principle that most people would never think. When I first learned of it, I was very surprised. So when you realize that 60% of job seekers are likely to get a job through a weak tie or acquaintance, how much does that surprise you? It doesn't surprise you, okay. And so the reason is they travel in different circles. So they have their own network. If you're an accountant and you're looking for opportunities in accounting, you're probably going to think it's a logical conclusion. I need to find people who are in accounting. And so when you're asking people, hey, do you know people? Or you, in an ad hoc way, you run into someone at a networking event or just a casual conversation in a Starbucks line or whatever, be open. You never know where that connection is going to come from. They can lead us to different people, and there's a lot of action that happens with this type of contact. So just something to be aware of. And then finally, number 4, you can't talk about networking without talking about LinkedIn. Needless to say, we could spend an hour just talking about it, and it deserves it. So today, I'm just going to mention it. There's a lot to learn here about how to optimize LinkedIn, not just to make contacts, but then, there's a lot of really interesting tips and techniques for, I'm going to just give you one offhand, finding people and then seeing where they're working or have worked and what jobs do they have open. So for that person, maybe you haven't been in touch with them for 5 years, but you can say, hey, it's been a long time since we've been in touch. I happen to notice that you have a job as such and such at your company. Do you know anything about it? Can you tell me anything about it? So that kind of ask I mentioned earlier is a very non-committal ask. The person might not answer. They might say, I really don't know anything, I'm sorry. Or they might really go out of their way for you. So that's a great way to use your contacts. Another one, and this is the focus of my point here briefly, is how do you get people to talk to? So this is the context of our kind of focus tonight. You can do it, and this is probably more the cold call concept, but through a LinkedIn. So you might follow people that have a lot of interesting things to say. They might be a thought leader, or somehow you're aware of somebody. Someone might have told you about someone, and you start looking at their feeds, and it's like, I think that person would be really interesting to talk to. So you can send them a note, an email, and just ask them, hey, I've been following you, and I'm wondering, I'm in the middle of a career campaign and looking for advice on X. And I've been following your feed, and I'm wondering if you might be willing to talk to me a little bit about it, because it seems like you have a lot of expertise. Now, I've talked a lot more than you're really probably going to say, because these are very short messages. But that's the point. You can, if you find someone, reach out. The worst that can happen, they don't answer. So the worst that happens is they don't respond, but it can often actually be good. They like to be asked, because we talked about it before. They might say, sure, that's fine. You asked for 20 minutes. That's all these meetings are. And then when you meet with them, it's usually either for coffee locally or it's a online video call. Better to do that than, just a phone call. So I'll get into that too in just a few minutes, because right now we're going to talk about the last part of our conversation today, which is how do you do this? So how do you actually get these meetings with people and run them? So I have 4 steps. The first thing you do is have scripts and steps. That's the secret to a lot of things, and especially if you are an introvert. I know firsthand. Once I did this years ago when I went from publishing to HR. And so I used the process similar to this. Well, I was an introvert, so I was dreading the whole thing. And when I, though, developed scripts and then did it a few times, it felt so easy. And so that's what I'm saying here, is to rely on the scripts and the structured steps, and you're going to be surprised. So you make an ask, you get ready, you run it, and then there's follow-up. Specifically, here's some a little more color on that. So you'll approach someone usually through InMail, LinkedIn, or email, and then spell out how you can help, what you're looking for and what you need from them. Now, one tip that's really important, don't give away all the questions you have or everything. And the reason is because in today's world, and we're probably all guilty of this, people prefer to sit behind their computers and email. So if you say, here are my questions I want to ask, I've heard this happen enough, I wanted to mention it. People will often say, oh, okay, well, I'll tell you that right now. And then the opportunity to meet with them, which is a networking building opportunity, now has disappeared. So don't give away too much, keep it close. And so basically, so-and-so, if you do get a referral source, and you usually will with this process, suggested you'd be a great person to talk to as I conduct a career campaign. I'm looking to find my next role in X, or I'm considering a shift. And I was wondering, he said that you're in this area, that you might be able to give me some information. So I'm making this up just to customize to what your need is. So that's your purpose. Then it's also introducing yourself briefly. You could say there a quick synopsis of your 2-minute profile, but not the 2-minute profile. So it could be, so my background is in such, and today I'm looking to do this. So you have a little bit of information, but again, don't give away too much, or there will be no reason to meet. You request 20 minutes, in person or video if possible, and state your agenda. So this again is very high level. I'm looking for career advice. I'm looking for recommendations for companies that could be a good fit, and just information about X. And so that would be all you really need to say there. So tip here at the bottom, don't send your resume. Does that surprise you when I say that? And it's because it doesn't surprise you? Okay, so the reason is because, again, you're asking them for advice or information, not for a job. If they say, great, send me your resume, of course you'll send your resume. And the other thing, remember, is that they can also look at your LinkedIn profile. So, what's that?
What did you just say?
Oh, and the other thing is, even if they don't ask for your resume, they'll probably go look at your LinkedIn profile.
Oh.
We all do. So it's like, sure, I'll meet with you, and they'll kind of check it out. So something, you might be aware of, if you're going to embark on a career campaign, a networking campaign, you want to make sure that your LinkedIn profile looks pretty good. There's all levels of what's good, but try to do the best you can. And one hint I can tell you now is once you do your 2-minute verbal pitch, you can put a version of that in your about page. So that will help you write a compelling about page. Just be sure you have at least one example of an achievement with an outcome, which I would have always said before, but now I'm learning it's a very important part of getting found by recruiters. Another way you can structure that is to give a list of your top, career achievement highlights. And then just like in your resume, I'm assuming you might have achievement bullets. So then you just pick out, say, your top 5 or 6 and write those as outcome-based statements. I did this, it resulted in that. That's what I mean. So in my appendix, in the presentation deck that you'll be sent by Angela later, I have a sample letter of approach, and you can adapt it for yourself. So the number 2 steps to manage a meeting is actually very similar to what I tell people when they get ready for interviews. It's all about the 2 P's, preparation, 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 practice, practice, practice. If you follow that rule of thumb, you're going to be much more comfortable and confident. You've got your 2-minute verbal pitch. You can use that in both cases, and you know what you're going to say. How much easier does it get? Color by number. So the background information, let's assume, because I think a lot of you indicated self-acknowledged introversion. You're not really comfortable with small talk. No problem. This is an easy one. You can do a couple things. One, look on their LinkedIn profile, find something on there. Maybe you have a lot of contacts in common. Oh, that's interesting. We know 10 people, the same people. Maybe they had a career that started someplace else, so they've gone through a pivot, and that's interesting to you. Or they've worked at a certain company, and that's good to know. There's going to be something there. So you say, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me today. I did took a moment to look at your LinkedIn profile, and I noticed we actually have a lot of contacts in common. So that was really interesting. I know we both know Joe, but it goes beyond that. So I thought that was really interesting, and that made me especially interested and appreciative of you taking the time to talk to me. That's it. So that's the icebreaker. And then you want to get right into it. You only have 20 minutes. You don't want to spend a lot of time on just gearing up with the icebreaker. So have that in and out, and then say, so as I mentioned, I had some questions for you, just like I was telling you before. Would you mind if I just gave you a quick snapshot of my background so you kind of know where I'm coming from, and maybe that would help you answer those questions more? Go ahead. So that's where you do that. And you give it, you've practiced it, you've prepared it. You don't necessarily have to memorize it. People are different, but you know what you want to say. So that's done, and then you have your questions that you've prepared. Also in my deck, I have some questions that you can ask depending on the phase you are in your career. There's the obvious one, like, what's a typical day like? So if you're just starting out. But if it's, I gave you some examples before, it could be maybe you're looking for the right kind of company, a company that values talent. So a good question there is, tell me about how your company approaches people development. So what is the process there to make sure people are trained, have the skills they need? What does the company do for that? So what you're really looking for is a company that's aware and has a process. They could say, we have an employee stipend for training and development, and so that's how we do it. Our leaders are all trained. Or you might get, well, I'm not really sure what we do here. And so that's going to tell you if that's important to you, because trained leaders usually means a more strategic culture. Then you're going to hear what you need to hear. So that's just an example. Have your questions ready, and then you're responsible for tracking the time, and so it could be just setting your phone alert to do that. So a note about the time. I say here, set the table. Confirm in the very beginning that they have 20 minutes. So this is important. You're responsible to remember you're making a good impression. Not only are you prepared, but you're running the meeting very systematically. So by saying, before we begin, I just wanted to double check, are you still able to meet with me for 20 minutes? So you could find out, yeah, that's great. Or actually, I have a meeting, I could only talk 15. Or sometimes it happens, my meeting was canceled. We can talk for 30 minutes or more if you want. That's really good information to know. So if they just have 15 minutes, you don't want to keep talking in there and they're anxious to leave. So very good, I like to call it setting the table so that everybody knows the expectations. And so the rest of it we've kind of talked about. Listening is really important. When we get nervous, and this is true for interviews too, sometimes we might tend to talk. And we ask them a question, but we're too anxious, and instead of listening, we're kind of just going on about something. Watch that, because I do a lot of interview coaching. And so if you can remember some of the things I already said, preparation and practice, and also listen. Just be ready for anything to happen, and that's important. Whatever it takes to remind yourself, you've asked the question. Another thing I like to say is put the period, or put the question mark after the question and stop talking. Put the period after the sentence. Very important. So wrapping up is also really important. So that's when you ask the referral after you've built the trust. You've built the relationship. Now they'll be like, well, yeah, I can think of someone. But if you start in the beginning, they might like, yeah, maybe I know someone. Yes?
When you're saying seek for 50-50 ratio, do you mean that 50% of the time I'm listening, 50% of the time I'm talking? Is that what you're saying by 50-50
yes.
ratio? Okay.
Yeah, it just gives you a rule of thumb. It could
Right,
be
but it's a
40-60.
balanced, yeah, conversation.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, it's just helpful. to remind yourself, again, I know a lot of people that do get nervous, or maybe they just talk like a lot. This is the time for disciplined conversation. So there you have it. The other important thing about any kind of networking, so I like to put it here, let me know if I can help you now or in the future. I'm always happy, if you want to reach out at any time. You never know, that person might be in this position you're in now at some point, and you want it to be a two-way street. If you LinkedIn, they can find you again too. Really important. And then finally, the next step. So you might say, so thank you so much, and do you mind if I link in with you? Fine, just sort of closes it up a little bit. So the other way about just finishing up is following up. And so, again, this might be clear to everybody to send a thank you note, but apparently there's a lot of people that don't. That's what the statistics tell us. So whether it's an interview again or a referral networking conversation, be sure you send a thank you note. Mostly nowadays, it used to be a question, is it email? Do you send it in the mail? Typically, email is adequate. I don't think anyone questions that anymore. And then if there's any promised information, or maybe later you think, oh, I know that he really likes this, and here's this article he might like, go ahead and send this. Oh, and by the way, I found this, I thought you might be interested. Another tip to all this, because it helps with your building of the network, remembering who you met, who introduced you to that person, and do you want to follow up with them later, is to document the meetings. So keep track of, when I was talking about your inner circle, who did they lead you to? You want to record that. So it could be in a matrix, like an Excel sheet or something, where you start with the people you might be reviewing all the people you know. In LinkedIn, you can do a report, pull all the contacts you have in LinkedIn. And then of these 500 people, what are the top 10 you want to start with? Who do you want to start with? Then you have them listed, you make notes, and then they referred you to somebody else. When did you talk to them? Who did they give you to? And then you might have a tickler column like follow up in 3 months. Because some people will say that. I remember when I was doing it and someone said, keep in touch with me. Let me know how it's going. And I remember it was like music to my ears at the time. And so if that's the case, you make a note. Or you might say, this person, maybe you met 20 people, over a couple of months, and then you got a job. And so at the end you say, these 5 people I want to make sure I keep in touch with. So that's also something you can flag. That's important because you will appreciate remembering that, and maybe 3 months go by, but you have a tickler now to keep in touch with them. So always look for opportunities to give back. So that's really the session I had planned. And my main thing here, you can feel free to take a look at some of these ideas, is to really think about what top 3 action items can I commit to doing over the next week, could be over the next 2 weeks, but before I leave or right when I get home tomorrow. And that's because, I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes when you go to a workshop, it all sounds good, and then you get busy. You go home, you get back to work or family. So try to come up with what's important to you. I mean, one idea is we started our exercise on your 2-minute commercial. If that seems of interest to you, that's a great thing to go back and start working on. So any questions? I presented a lot of information, but I'm happy you can come up to me afterwards or ask something right now. Any questions at this moment? Yes.
Well, when I was going through this, it was kind of difficult because I feel like it's assuming that I've been in healthy work environments, and I feel like I've been in a whole slew for decades of toxic environments, which does not foster improvement or growth or thriving.
Sure.
And so I feel like this is assuming a lot of my background where I can't really have me be me. It's more just survival until I've had enough. And I feel like toxic work environments are getting more prevalent. And so I just feel like, how do you approach an interview where that was the case, where you can't really say, oh, this is what I did, and I had this great idea, and then it improved the company, because it's like, no, I'm just trying to get through the day.
Yeah.
So I feel like with of my background that I was in a healthy
Yeah, well, that's you bring up some good things. There's a couple ways I want to respond. One, we don't all have, and no one's necessarily expecting of these gigantic achievements. I changed the whole system. Sometimes we do it, and that's called an impact. You did this, people liked it, and then everyone started doing it. Most of us don't have that happen. So I would just start with what did happen that you're proud of. Keep it simple, and not like, well, I never did this big thing. Just think about what you did do and start with who you are and where you're at. And as far as toxic work environments, that can be awkward. You never, of course, want to mention something like that. It's negative. Why did you leave your last job? Maybe there was a reason around that. You're going to have to do the preparation and the practice approach. What am I going to say? How am I going to say it? So some of those questions could be tricky. And if it helps to write it out and practice it till it's comfortable, that's what you have to do. But you brought up a lot of things. I do have one more comment. If finding the right culture is part of that process of avoiding toxic environments. Now, you can't go into a meeting and say, if you say, what kind of culture is this? They're not going to tell you. Actually, I have questions I've developed because so many people want to know, but you can't come out and ask because they're not going to, they'll say, oh, we have a great culture. I'm not saying they're lying, but it's very awkward for them to reveal something that's maybe more in the gray area. So you want to ask about culture in a way that's less direct. And if you do come out with something direct, I'm curious, very neutral, pleasant, nothing like you're probing. And then talk to other people. That's a way to use the networking. Who do you know or who can you find out who works there and maybe get some information? So there's a lot to what you just said. Good questions. Anything else? Okay, so feel free to come up and ask me other questions, but I did give my contact if you want to link in with me. That's always fun. Feel free to reach out. And Angela, you're going to send the deck later, correct?
Send the slide deck with the.
Oh, okay, great. Sounds good. Okay, thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate that you just came out on a week and maybe a work night and just, took a chance here. So hopefully you're walking away with something you can use. Thank you.